Well, taking a look at Pennsylvania now, where the state's highest court dealt another blow to the Trump campaign's efforts to overturn election results. In a unanimous decision, the court rejected the Trump team's baseless claims of mass voter fraud. This comes one day after the state dismissed a lawsuit brought by Republican Representative Mike Kelly that argued that the state's GOP legislature violated the Constitution when it expanded absentee voting. So for more on this, I want to bring in CBS News 2020 campaign reporter Zak Hudak. He's been covering the state of Pennsylvania for our political unit. Boy, you have been all over it. Pennsylvania had been targeted by the Trump campaign. Even before the election, there were challenges. So it's going to keep, your head's spinning a little. Which challenge is this? So can you walk us through this particular lawsuit?
Yeah, Marie, this latest one, this Mike Kelly lawsuit that we just got the state court ruling on the other day, the reason that was unique among these, at this point, we were almost at a dozen lawsuits in Pennsylvania the Trump campaign has been in one way or another involved in to try to change the results here. But this one was particularly significant because, unlike the others, which sought to throw out a few thousand votes here and there, maybe 10,000 votes, this one sought to disenfranchise about 2.6 million voters. It sought to toss every no-excuse mail ballot in the state. Now, Anne-Marie, those ballots were allowed because of a law that was passed by the Republican-controlled State House and State Senate last fall. And it was part of a bigger package that the Democratic governor supported. But this was bipartisan legislation, and the goal was just to allow more voters to be able to vote. Now, it was just by sheer happenstance that this came right ahead of the pandemic and all of these people ended up voting by mail. But essentially what this lawsuit tried to do was undo that bipartisan legislation from over a year ago now. So it was, if there were one lawsuit that had the potential to change the results here, it was way out of left field, but it was this one. This is the one that would have thrown out 2.6 million votes. And as of now, it's not happening. One of the plaintiff Sean Parnell, who actually right near here was running unsuccessfully against Connor Lamb, tweeted after the ruling that it was not over yet and sort of implied that they would be appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court.
I'm glad that you pointed that out about how Pennsylvania changed the law when it came to absentee ballots, because it had nothing to do with the pandemic. They didn't know the pandemic was happening. It had everything to do with allowing more people giving more people the ability to vote, which is the point. In Pennsylvania, you needed a reason to not show up at the polls. And then they said, no, you don't need a reason. Just, ask for a ballot and we'll do it that way. And then the pandemic made things just a little more complicated. You talked about the vast impact, the wide-ranging impact that this lawsuit could have had if it was successful. Is that sort of the key difference when you look at this particular lawsuit versus some of the other legal challenges in Pennsylvania?
Anne-Marie, I think that's the case. I want to clarify, this was always an unbelievable long shot and remains so, even if they try to continue to appeal. But that's what we sort of started to see. On Election Day, on the day after Election Day, and the day after that, there was this flood of lawsuits coming in. And we had a lot of information that we didn't know. We didn't know how many provisional ballots were still out there. We didn't even know how many mail ballots were still out there or still coming in. There was that 3-day extension in Pennsylvania. So we didn't have enough information to know for about a week after if any of these lawsuits would matter. And for that reason, it seemed like this dozen or so lawsuits, every one of them could have tremendous impact because we had the president going on TV implying they could. But as we found out, by about a week after, the president would need a heck of a lot more votes than 10 or 20,000 votes to swing the results here. And really what it would take is something like that, like throwing out every no-excuse mail ballot in the entire state.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Zach, before we let you go, I want to ask you about something else. Pennsylvania State Senator Doug Mastriano tested positive for COVID-19. He found out he was positive while he was at the White House to meet with the president. He was meeting with the president about these legal challenges in Pennsylvania. And so I'm wondering if the fact that he tested positive is going to have, a negative impact or make things a little more challenging for the Trump campaign. As you mentioned, they're still not backing down, and they still seem to think that there are more legal avenues for them in Pennsylvania. But Mastriano testing positive can't be a good thing.
I think it's hard to make it much more difficult at this point. I think we are as near having all the nails in the coffin as we possibly could be. But I would point out on Senator Mastriano's case, it's incredibly unfortunate, and obviously none of us would hope for that to happen. But I've been in this state since I think it would be about a week before we started having shutdowns in places like New York. So even slightly before the country really turned its attention to COVID, and particularly in those early stages, but throughout that, Senator Mastriano has been sort of one of the loudest voices in Harrisburg, protesting shutdowns, frequently calling for protests outside the Capitol, where he is running around maskless, and he actually live streams much of it on his phone, so he kind of flouts that he is maskless. Just a couple weeks ago, the week following the election, a number of members of the Republican members of the Pennsylvania House had a press conference to talk about the election indoors. There's about 20 of them. None of them wore masks. So there is sort of this culture within a facet. It's not everyone in the PA GOP, but there is a culture within a chunk of the Pennsylvania legislature that really has not taken COVID particularly seriously. And again, I want to extend my sorrow to the senator and his family, and I really did throw in my thoughts and prayers. But this is someone who, much like the president, sort of very publicly flouted that he was not abiding by the COVID protocols.
Yep, and there you have it. And, it's a good point. No one wants anyone to contract COVID-19, especially the way this virus works. Sometimes you just never know if you're going to be hit hard or if it's going to be just sort of a mild go at it for you. But we know what we need to do to avoid getting it. So if you ignore the recommendations, your risk increases substantially. Zach, thank you so much.